Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. This is going to be a birding related video, however it is going to be a little bit different. Don't worry, this is not taking the place of one of my episodes. This is adding to it. So today I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about the gear that I use, especially if you're getting into bird watching. There aren't honestly many things that you need to get started. A good field guide here and there if you're not too familiar with the birds in your area is always great, but even then the internet at your disposal, you can pretty much get out there and get going no matter what. The biggest object that you're going to see that birders are going to use and recommend to you are binoculars. Now, there is no answer to what is the best pair of binoculars. Alright, there isn't. Different length, different definition, brand, weight, size. How far are you trying to see? Are you trying to see something in the woods right next to you? Or are you trying to see something for ocean watching? In which case we're going to talk about spotting scopes as well. So this is not going to be a field guide to every single thing out there. It's going to be my recommendation for beginners, and the two pairs or essentially the pair of binoculars that I started with and the spotting scope that I started with. And I'm still relatively new to a lot of my hardware. I just upgraded to my first professional grade pair of binoculars, and that'll be a separate video. I don't want to, put that price point as a beginner point. Obviously, if you have the budget to go get yourself Swarovskis or Zeiss or so higher end Vortex, of course, you can do so. But in terms of being a beginner, you're going to want to be, probably looking on the budget side of things, especially if you don't know if the hobby's for you or if you only do it casually. If you do this as a big birding year, you don't need to tell me, I don't need to tell you that Vortex and Zeiss and Swarovskis are unbelievable, you know that. But for me, getting into birding more seriously recently, I have my beginner optics, which I went with Celestron for both, a name that most people do recognize, in any brand that you're going to, if you go on Amazon and type in binoculars for birding, Celestron is going to be popping up, and so are the other brands that I've already mentioned. So I just kind of wanted to talk about my experience with my first sets of equipment, even point out maybe a couple of the field guides and stuff that I use. I would like to talk about field guides maybe in a different version of this one day, but I do like talking about a little bit of the hardware that I'm using at the moment. The hardware maybe I would have considered more. So just because I bought Celestron doesn't mean that you need to, and maybe I would have went with something different had I known better. So I'm mainly here to talk to you guys about that. I just did my first tech video for this channel, which was for my astrophotography camera. I'm planning on doing one for the camera lenses that I'm using, what I would prefer, what you guys can look for, some stuff like that. So I am looking to do some of the actual hardware for birding, and because like I said, you can bird just by yourself. You can just go walk out in the woods, ID them, take a picture with your phone. But as you get more and more serious, or depending on if you want to be a field guide sketcher, if you want to be looking at them from very far away, if you want binoculars, good and low light, stuff like that. So we can cover all of that, not just in this episode, but as I get different gear and start using it. And feel free to leave your recommendations and comments and experiences in the description below as well. Just because I had a great brand or a great experience with a brand, maybe you didn't. So warranty is obviously a very important thing, hence the reason a brand like Vortex is so loved, and I cannot wait to get my first pair of Vortexes one day. I'm looking at the Vipers one day, or I'm probably going to upgrade them with my spotting scope, but I don't want to ramble on too long. I'll unbox my spotting scope right here, and then I will unbox the binoculars for my starting equipment, and then we can discuss them both, and I'll give you guys the models and the price and stuff like that. But yeah, it's gonna be fun. I know this isn't as exciting as going out into the woods, but it is important to kind of talk to people and new birders about what you should and should not be buying, and again, for the price point as well. Alright, so as for my one and only beginner spotting scope that I have, this is the Celestron Ultima 80. Now, there's a couple different Celestron models. Some of them are a little bit cheaper than this, some are much more expensive. Again, this is going to be more of the beginner lineup, and one of the more essential pieces of a birder's gear is going to be the spotting scope. Now, truth be told, my binoculars are, my newest pair are a lot nicer than this, so I'm not using this too much, but I don't use the spotting scope nearly enough. Now, I will say that this is decent. It retails for $270, well, so between $250 and $270, depending on if you get the phone mount for back here, I bought the one with the phone mount. It was an extra 20 bucks or so. Actually, I believe it's an extra $10, depending on the version that you get. There's also a couple different methods that you can use. So right here, like this piece, is at an angle. Now, you can get one that is straight on of almost most of the scopes, or get one at a 45-degree angle like this one is. I recommend doing the 45-degree angle. It's nice, and honestly, a big part of birding is allowing others to kind of look through your scope, and I know I've had a lot of good success with like strangers just offering me a view through their spotting scope, usually a vortex, but you know, I'm definitely okay breaking out the Celestron for this. Now, if you're looking for a good 200 or less, honestly, the reason I say that, this thing goes on sale at all times. I'm looking at it live on Amazon right now, and it is $215 with a $15 coupon. So you're looking at 200 pretty much on the nose, and it's not too bad, and that comes with the phone mount. So definitely you can check out some sales. Now, in terms of the magnification, again, this is all depending on what you're actually looking for. This is a pretty good size, and you know, hopefully the camera can pick it up. This is also waterproof, which is definitely pretty nice. So the diameter for this guy is an 80mm, and the focal length is 480mm. As for the zoom in the eyepiece, it goes from 20x at its minimum to 60x at its highest point. So when you're looking similar to binoculars, which I'll talk about after this, this is an Ultima 80 with a 20 to 60x zoom, 80mm. That is the easiest way to kind of describe what you're looking for here. Pretty good size. You can definitely get away with more zoom, but this is a pretty solid, like, beginner piece. There are some other brands you can definitely consider. There's the Bushnell Trophy Extreme, which retails for right around that $200 mark as well. Now, the reason I'm not a huge fan of this model, and again, that is all part of reviewing these things, I don't think it works out really well in low light situations. So recently I went after my first really rare goose, and it was very dark and just doesn't do too great in terms of in the dark, whereas let's say I believe he was using a Vortex Diamondback, which is double the price, was a lot better. So, you know, there is definitely some differences there. Now, the most similar one to this is going to be the Trail Seeker, which is very similar but has worse reviews overall. So that is from Celestron as well. If you're looking to spend a little bit more, my honest recommendation, if you want to stick to around 200, this or the Bushnell, or try and find a used one, that is also a really good option if you can find an old, I believe it's a Nikon that you can get some pretty good deals on, third party. You could also go with the Vortex Optics Crossfire HD, which is really solid, and again, they tend to perform it in a lot better lower light. Celestron also offers the M2 Regal, which is an $850 scope. I would hesitate going that route just with this brand. Celestron is really solid, but when you get to those really high points, I would go with a different brand. That is just my opinion from experience and using mine versus other brands overall. So if you want to get a slightly better version of the Ultima, and I'm trying to pull up live prices real quick, there's the Ultima 100, which is a 22 to 66x and a 100mm instead of the 80, but that is also $450, and again, you would probably have some different options at that point. So depending on your price point, this, just because of all the sales, I would say is $200 or less. That is a pretty decent spot to stay. You know, it does come with a bag, and of course, and everything. Now, it does not come with a tripod, just like most of them will not. If you're interested in picking up a tripod for it, I would recommend investing in one really good tripod to start off. The main reason being, you know, tripod is going to be your bread and butter. I don't entirely love the tripod that I went with. The main reason being, it's just a little bulky for what I actually have, and I'm just not a huge fan of it. However, it works well for my spotting scope, and everything else. If you're looking to just pick, this one up, personally, you can also go with the Celestron Ultima tripod. It's $87. It would go with this, so essentially a $300 combo between this and a tripod, which is honestly not terrible. That is relatively beginner. I will warn against going with really cheap spotting scopes. And honestly, I was given the same recommendation, and I kind of stuck with it, and I'm happy that I did. You will, when you go on Amazon and you type in spotting scopes, you're going to see reviews and brands that are, you know, in the $100, $110 range. They're not going to be great. To be honest, you're going to outlive them pretty quick. Again, if you're just getting started, maybe you can start with one of those, but I would say if you're not sure if you're getting into birding, then a spotting scope isn't necessarily for you right away. This is for really far away birds, ocean watching, stuff like that, and even then, a lot of these beginner scopes are really going to struggle with getting out there. So definitely try and look up best reviews in your price point. Audubon also has a guide for it. I honestly went to Reddit quite a bit, talked to a lot of my local birders. When you're out there and seeing what people are using, ask. That is my best recommendation. The reason I learned that Vortex was such a great brand was because I was breaking this out, and I would turn around and somebody would have a different brand, and you know, I would ask to look through it, and obviously if they say no, don't. But a lot of times birders are going to be pretty generous and allow you to actually use their equipment to at least check it out. I'm not saying cameras or anything, but spotting scopes is like a community gift. It's great. I love it. I don't use it nearly enough, but again, I want to upgrade this in the future just because it is decent and I think really, really, really solid for the price. But there are definitely better options depending on your comfort level with spending more and how often you're going to be doing it. That is the biggest recommendation I can give here. If you're going to be birding for a little bit, you don't know how often, and you're not going to be, you know, hunting birds over 100 miles a trip like I do, then you can get away with a cheaper option like this. Or you can skip this and get a decent pair of binoculars, or have an okay pair of binoculars like I'm about to show you, and then see if that works out. And if the bug bites you and you really get into birding and, you know, watching over landscapes, and of course you don't need this just for birding. This is a review as the spotting scope itself. I don't use this for astronomy, so I will not speak on the behalf of that, but obviously it will not do as well as a telescope. But even if you're using it for, you know, breaking it out, looking for hunting grounds or looking for different mammals or whatever else, it is a solid piece, again, for that 2 to 250 range or lower. But I would definitely say look at the Vortex over this just because of low lighting situations and a better warranty. Now let's take a look at pretty much the comparable binoculars. Alright, now on to the binoculars. Obviously these look extremely similar to the spotting scope. That is because these are relatively the same in terms of like tier level. These are considered like low range, I would consider them. You know, low range is pretty much 2 to 250 on down. You could have $100 or less category, but again, I usually say save up for a slightly better option. For these are the Celestron Natureview DX 8x42 binoculars, BAK-4 prisms, rubber armored, fog and waterproof binoculars. I bought these before I was going to do birding seriously. I actually bought these a few years ago on a ridiculous sale. They retail on Amazon for $170, but they are almost always on sale. So these are really solid. These are actually considered one of the best budget pairs, even for the Audubon rankings for binoculars. And I prefer these to the spotting scope. And that was one of the things, like, you will use binoculars more than you will most likely use a spotting scope. So again, if you're looking at this in terms of a beginner or just someone trying to get started, or you want to pick out just a decent pair, I actually really do like these. Now, again, in a low light situation, they are not my favorite things in the world, but they still do a pretty solid job in almost every circumstance for me. Now, when you're looking at sizes for binoculars, the best bet for you as a beginner, or if you're looking for just one pair to really heavily invest in, 8x42 is by far and away the most popular size of binoculars for birding. Now, my most recent pair is a 10x42, I believe, or the 10x50s. I forget which one I bought. Basically, the higher you go up in numbers, the way the field of view changes, usually the more light that they can actually pull in, but that also depends on the brand and how well they are in low light situations. It also depends on where you're birding. If you're like me, and a lot of your time is spent in woods and on short trails in Pennsylvania, or New York, Maryland, etc., 8x42 is really solid. They'll actually sometimes outperform a 10x42 depending on who you ask, because you are closer to the subjects. You're closer to the trees, you have a limited field of view. These are more popular size-wise for the average beginner because they're also easier to manage. A 10 by 42, a 10 by 50, these larger binoculars weigh a lot more than you think. And yes, it does come with a band as well. I just don't have it attached because I typically just kept it in here. And again, I'm using my other newer pair a lot more. You know, comes of course with the little caps for both sides, and you can mount it on a tripod if you're interested. But 8x42s are just really, really solid overall units, and they're what I started with, and they're highly what I recommend to you to start with. And now, if you're going, let's say you live in New Jersey and you want to do a lot of shore watching, or Florida, or wherever, I think you could consider a 10 by 42 pair of binoculars, just because you might want the extra range and the light usage. But again, that is up to you. I think an 8x42 is a really good starting spot. It also teaches you how to use binoculars, because yes, it doesn't sound like going from an 8x42 to a 10x42 would be different, but it actually does. Like, your eyes do kind of have to get used to it. So there's also much bigger sizes, and a lot of times people make the mistake of, well, there's a 12x50. I can see birds farther away with that. You can. They're heavier than you think, and no, they're not going to be comfortable or fun for the average beginner. So I recommend an 8x42 as your beginner size. Now, again, these retail for about $170. They're on sale right now for about $125, and that's a solid price. I have no regrets about buying these as my first, like, more serious pair of binoculars. Again, all being in like that budget range, but I really, really do enjoy them. As for alternatives, I can say this until I'm blue in the face. Vortex. If you're going to be spending, you know, $150 or less, these Celestrons are a really good option. But then you also have the Vortex Optics Triumph HDs, which retail for about $100 on the nose, and I would consider them arguably like among the best. Really solid. Again, that warranty of being an unlimited, unconditional warranty and stuff really makes Vortex like a big grab for people. If you want to bump it up to 200 or less, you can also go with the optics, Vortex Optics Crossfire HD. Again, depending on the size that you want to go for. There are also some Monarchs from Nikon. However, Nikon does have some reliability issues with their binoculars, so do be careful. And of course, you can upgrade with Celestron as well. With anything else, if there's a brand that you're particularly fond of, there's no problem with that. But I would rather tell you my experience with this brand versus other units that I have seen, or at least have the company of like using and stuff like that. You also have Bushnell, which makes some decent binoculars. Now, Bushnell is a little bit hit or miss with some of their products. With anything else, do some research. You know, this doesn't have to be the only video that you watch. The Bushnell Trophy series are really affordable, you know, typically $100 or less, but I don't think they're quite on par with some of these like a little bit higher range series. But Bushnell is definitely more of an affordable brand for you to take a look at as well. But I am really happy with these. I would say if I had to go back again, I would most likely purchase a Vortex for right around the same price, but I have no quarrel with these, especially if you can get them, excuse me, on a really good price. They're excellent. I really, really, really do enjoy it. If you see, like, if you want, you know, some higher end options, I'll be talking about more of the like higher end spectrum in my one of my next videos when I talk about the new binoculars that I purchased. But Vortex, Celestron, these are reliable brands, and those are typically the ones that I would go with. Now, there's also a ringer of the group, which is Athlon. I have not used Athlon. However, some of the reviews are putting them in the same category as a lot of this. And, you know, the Argus HD is very comparable to this. The Athlon Midas is a little bit more expensive than this, right around $250. But again, depending on the sales, you know, you can always get the Argos as well, which is around the $220 range. This is more of a review for these, but I still want to mention to you guys some other options. So in terms of just brands that I would recommend if you don't go with Celestron, again, Vortex, If you can get a pair of like Zeiss or something cheap, just be wary that some of them really expensive brands have lower cost objects because they're not the best. So just be careful. Just because it's a big name brand doesn't always mean that it's the better quality. But in terms of like the alternates to this, again, I would say probably the Vortex is your best bet if you don't quite want to go with Celestron. But in terms of Celestron, again, they are a very reputable brand. They do a really nice job in terms of making really quality optics. I mean, I have 2 telescopes from them, I have a pair of binoculars, and I have my spotting scope from them. The only thing I don't have is a tripod. However, you can definitely purchase a Celestron tripod if you want to go that route. Now, in terms of the tripod, I didn't set it up here. I'm not a huge fan of it. I have the Manfrotto. I believe it's like the Travel 4-in-1 series. It's a good tripod, but I hate the head. And I can get into that another day, but essentially, like, just how you balance everything out, it's a little bit of a pain. You don't necessarily need a tripod at all for an 8x42 pair of binoculars. If you go heavier, depending on your comfort level, yeah, you can definitely mount them, but I actually just decided to start swapping my brand for tripod, so I'll be talking about that again in another episode. I want to try the gimbal head instead, which is like a, you know, an arm that comes off and rotates like this instead of having to balance everything out. I think it's going to be pretty cool. I'm waiting for it in the mail the next couple days. But I will talk about tripods and stuff in the future. But this has been my review of the Ultima 80 Celestron spotting scope and the Nature DX 8x42 Celestron binoculars. I definitely think this is a really solid setup. Again, if you're looking to purchase a spotting scope or binoculars, I would go binoculars first, but as of course up to you guys as well. There's a pair of binoculars out there for any budget, and don't be afraid to start smaller, like this, or even smaller, and then work your way up from there, just depending on how much you like the hobby. My telescope, I use the least out of everything, and it costs the less out of all of the optics that I use. So, you know, you gotta pick and choose sometimes, and definitely just go with a really solid brand. Head to Reddit, head to other YouTuber reviews just to see what they use, and if you have the option of actually going out into the field, and you run into some bird watchers, and they're using a spotting scope, or you see they have binoculars, ask them what they're using. 9 times out of 10, they're going to be extremely nice, and they're going to give you an honest opinion about it. I've gotten good reviews and bad reviews for ungodly expensive binoculars that I would have loved one day, but weren't worth it. So definitely a really good way is just get out there, see how much you're going to enjoy using this stuff in the field, and then base it off of your budget and how much you're going to be using it is better than any advice I can possibly give you. But that's going to do it, guys. Thank you all so much for joining me on my little optics review here. Like, comment, subscribe, share the video if you find it helpful. Leave your recommendations for either beginner tips or what you're a big fan of brand-wise, or any bad experience you've had with a different brand in the description below, and follow me on Instagram if you guys want to get a little bit more involved in the community that I'm building here. Check out all of my bird watching videos and stuff like that, and I'll see you next time. Happy birding, everybody.